Hey everybody, this is Mike with PreSonus, and today we're behind the scenes at the River City session for a band called Burris.
Don't you remember that you said our love would last forever?
And what we want to talk about today are the top 5 ways that you can get a good recording when your band is all in the same room and you have loud and quiet sources that you want to capture. So coming in at number 1, the most important thing, bar none, that you can do is to put physical distance between the loudest source, which in our case is the drums, and the quietest source, which in our case is acoustic guitar. So the inverse square law says that for every doubling of distance, you lose 3 decibels. So just put some distance and you'll get better isolation. But coming in at number 2, we have mic placement. So every microphone has what they call a polar pattern, and that is the area of sound around the microphone that rejects or accepts the sound. In this case, we have what's called a cardioid pattern, and that means that it rejects sound from the rear. And so what we've done in this case is we have pointed the rear of the microphone towards our loudest source, our drums, so that we get the maximum rejection of the loud source. Also, with regard to mic placement, sometimes you have to get a bit creative. So we had an upright bass on this session, and those are known for being a little bit difficult to get the mic placement right. You know, your bass player may be moving a little bit, and sometimes it's difficult to capture the full sound. So what we've done here is we've taken a PM2 and a bit of foam, and we have wedged the PM2 right next to the body of the bass, and that way we get a full direct sound without much bleed. Okay, coming in at number 3, we have isolation. Anything that you can do to put a physical barrier between loud and quiet sources is going to help you get a better recording. In our case, we have these really nice baffles that are professionally made, but if you are trying to do a lower budget project, you can go to a thrift store, and I highly recommend finding some cubicle panels. They're being thrown away all the time, and they make great baffles. Coming in at number 4, we have instrument selection. So anytime you have microphones in close proximity to each other, you want to choose darker instruments for things that you want to reduce bleed on, and brighter instruments for things you want to stick out. So for our acoustic guitar, we used a Taylor guitar, which is a brighter instrument. Because it's quieter, we wanted it to stick out a little bit more. For cymbals, which tend to bleed everywhere, we swapped out these smaller, brighter cymbals for larger, darker cymbals. So number 5, sometimes we have limitations that we just can't get around. And in that situation, the only thing you can do is fix it in the mix. So now we're going to look at our mix and see what we can do after the fact to fix bleed.
Okay, so our recording session is now over. The band has gone home, and we are back in the studio getting ready to mix. So one concern that I had during tracking process was that the drummer is also a vocalist. With drums being so much louder than vocals, there's a concern about the bleed into the drum microphone. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to listen during an instrumental section to see how bad the bleed is. So here's the drummer's vocal. Oh yeah, it almost sounds like an overhead. So is this a problem? The only reason that this would be a problem is if it is actually canceling out the audio from another channel. So the ones I would be concerned with are the drum overhead, maybe the snare drum mic. So let's take a listen to the drum overhead and this vocal channel at the same time to see what it sounds like. Okay. It's a little difficult to tell just by listening if this is or is not an issue. So I've got a couple tricks I can show you. The first thing I'm going to do is use this tool called a phase meter. So I put the phase meter on my master bus, and then what this phase meter is going to do is going to tell me if the left side and the right side are in phase or out of phase. So a higher number down here at the bottom means that we're more in phase. A lower number means we're out of phase. If this number is negative, that means that there's actually cancellation happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan my drum vocal all the way to the right and my overhead all the way to the left. And now I'm going to play the track and see what the correlation is. Okay, so we've got a negative correlation. That means that there is cancellation happening, and I would expect if I invert the phase using Mix Tool that would go positive. Yeah, pretty good. So we probably could improve our correlation even more, right? One way we can do this is by manually moving the tracks. So I'm going to zoom way in. The top waveform is your overhead and the bottom is your drum vocal. And if you inspect these, you see that when the overhead is peaking, the drum vocal is dipping. And that is how we know it's out of phase. So what I'll do is I will find the very beginning of a peak and I'll put my cursor there. And then I'll take the thing that's closer to the snare drum source, which in this case, the drum vocal is closer than the overhead. And so I'm just going to kind of drag this until I see that the waveforms are lined up. So let's zoom out a little bit and see if it looks closer. Yeah, it looks a lot better to me. So let's look at our phase meter again. Oh, now how did that happen? We've got a negative correlation again. Oh, that's because we have our phase inverted, right? So let's undo that. Oh, wow. Do you hear the problem? We've gotten the snare drum to be in phase better, but now we've got a phasing effect on our vocal. So that leads me to my final point with time alignment. Don't fix it. If it's not a glaring issue, you probably are going to end up hurting your mix more than helping it by moving things around, adding delays, inverting phases. So use these tools sparingly. So if you want to hear the result of all these tips, you can head on over to any of PreSonus' social media sites to check out the live performance of Burris playing their song Willow. Enjoy!